Today I'm at a local bakery and I'm super excited. Established archaeology studies have proven that human beings have been making bread for over 10,000 years. Believe it or not, history has shown that bakers came before farmers. So I am here with Jay O'Neill, and you are one of the pastry chefs here at, I always botch the name, I think locals call it Pandamore, but that's not correct.
It's
so
all sorts of names.
Okay, so tell me what the true name is.
I say it Pane d'Amour, but all forms are acceptable.
And it's a French word, and what does that actually mean?
It's kind of French and Italian, bread of love.
Oh, bread of love, that's beautiful. Awesome. Okay, so tell me a little bit about being a pastry chef.
Being a pastry chef is a very difficult yet rewarding career. It comes with a lot of hard work, a lot of late nights, early mornings. Basically, you spend your time working when other people are having fun, and you're supplying them with the food that they use at their celebrations, their birthdays, their parties. It's a really important aspect of being a baker is that we're making the food that people use to celebrate life, and I take that very seriously.
That gave me goosebumps. That was beautiful. Thank you, Jay.
Yeah.
How long have you been a pastry chef?
I have been a baker and a chef for almost my entire life. I started cooking in restaurants in college. I ended up going to cooking school, and then immediately after that started studying bread and working for some big bread bakeries in Seattle. So I've done a lot of bread, rustic bread work, and then I've also done laminated doughs, which are croissants and Danish, and then desserts as well.
Called it a laminated bread, which this is a new term I'm not familiar with.
So a laminated dough is basically what you make your croissants out of.
Okay.
And what we do is we make a dough, and then we take a giant block of butter, and we fold it in the middle of this dough.
Yum.
And then we use, some people at home roll it out by hand. Here in the bakery we have what's called a sheeter. It's like an automatic rolling pin.
Okay.
And so we sheet this out very thin, and then we fold it. And then we sheet it and we fold it, and we do this multiple times. And if you cut through that dough, what you'd see is kind of like plywood. So you'd see a layer of dough, a layer of butter, a layer of dough, a layer of butter. And that's what gives croissants that really flaky rise, the really open and airy crumb, and of course all the butter that you get in croissants. It's in the dough and it's laminated in the dough. Laminated just means folded, basically.
Okay. And everyone, if you're a baker, they say butter makes it better. So.
Butter makes it better. It
That
doesn't
really
matter
makes
whether you're a
sense.
baker or a chef. You know, the chef says the first thing and the last thing in the pan is butter. Yeah, we use a lot of butter, sugar, and eggs in baking.
So if there's someone out there who is an aspiring baker, what would you tell them as far as like the worst case scenario when you have had to, the like middle of the night when you've had to come to work?
My suggestion is do something different.
Do something different.
And that's really me. But it's tough. It's late nights,
Yeah.
as I said, and early mornings. And around holidays, you can end up working a lot of hours. There's certain times of year you can't take days off, or you can't take vacation. So it's really, it's a career path that you have to be committed to. And slightly crazy, we say. You have to love it. You don't make a whole lot of money. It's hard on the body. And the hours aren't great, but it is very satisfying to step back at the end of the day and look at what you've created. And it's even more satisfying to see the looks on people's faces when they receive their products. That's why I do it, that connection with the customer over something that I consider art. It's edible, but it's art. And the look and the feeling that it gives people is really what drives me.
It sounds like that actually bakers are like the true original essential workers.
We really are. I mean, back in medieval times, the baker was the center of each village. Each village would generally only have one baker, and he was considered very important, you know, high up there in the level of society back then. Not so much nowadays, but you know, bread was a huge staple for people back then, and the baker was a very important person in your village. If you didn't have a baker, you didn't have bread. So it's strange to think about that now when our grocery stores have hundreds of loaves of bread, and most of our work is, you know, done by machines and factories. But artisan bakers, we like to kind of hold that traditional and keep it alive.
How do you guys kind of gauge how much you're baking? Is it according to sales? Is it according
Generally, we kind
to
of go by
holiday
sales.
or?
We like to keep a log of what we do over the year so that we know when busier times.
Oh.
Obviously, at Pane being open for 18 years now, we know when our busiest times. Being in a tourist town, summers are really busy for us, farmers markets and stuff like that.
Right.
So we kind of go by history and by sales. And it's not always right. It's a constant guessing game. You never get perfect at it. You either don't quite have enough or you have too much. And it's just part of the acumen of being a good business owner. I think that our company does a really good job. We also donate all of our leftovers to the food bank.
Oh, nice.
And then what can't go to the food bank goes to feed livestock, so that we're a no-waste bakery, and we're very proud of that.
Nice. Talk to me a little bit about holiday baking, because that's got to be really crazy. So Thanksgiving, Christmas, what are some of the bigger
Easter.
holidays? Easter?
Easter is a big one. Christmas is usually the biggest. Thanksgiving is huge as well. Easter, Mother's Day is a nice one. Those big holidays when people tend to get together, that's when we do the most. And what we'll do is usually we have a bunch of extra stuff that we normally wouldn't do. And then we have more stuff that we would make out of our normal everyday baking. So it can make for a really stressful time of year where you're
Right.
making a bunch of products that you don't make all the time.
Right.
And then you have to make extra of the products that you do. So it's a lot of long hours.
What is your personal favorite thing to bake in the pastry genre?
That's a really tough one. I do like, as much as I get really worn out around the holidays, I do like all the holiday baking stuff. And
Like
things that you
when
don't,
you say holiday baking, talk to me
pies,
like pies.
and bûche de Noëls.
What- whoa,
Bûche
back
de Noël is a traditional French holiday cake. It's
Oh.
a rolled up cake. It's usually filled and rolled, and it looks like a log.
Not
And then
like a
there'll be
fruit
those-
cake.
Not like a fruit cake.
Okay, so
Um,
tell me, let's just hit on that for a little bit for
Yeah.
viewers who, because this is the first time I've heard of this. So tell me a little bit about, it's a rolled up
It's a
log.
rolled cake, and it's supposed to look like a log, and they usually make little marzipan mushrooms and stuff to put on it. It's very traditional in France around the holiday
Oh, okay,
season.
I actually think I saw that at a show, so you actually can shape it like a log,
Yeah,
right?
because you make it's almost like a jelly roll.
Okay,
It's
and then you
something
have like a
similar to
little branch coming out,
it. Yeah,
right?
little branches, and you usually frost it and do, try to make it look like
And
bark.
what is this actually consist of?
It's whatever the baker wants. It's
Oh.
traditionally just a cake and a filling, and then a frosting on
So
the outside.
it's a sweet, it's
Yes,
a sweet
very sweet.
bread,
It's
sweet
a cake for sure.
It's a cake.
So I really love baking around the holidays, and I love the chance it gives you to do something new and to find recipes and explore different cultures. It's one of the best parts about cooking and baking is discovering things that you've never heard of and then trying to master it.
Have you ever had to bake something kind of on the fly where you came in and you were under the gun and
All the
your
time,
employer
yeah.
said, this is what we're doing for a special order?
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about maybe a time where you maybe didn't know what the heck you were doing and...
There's times every place I've gone to, I learned something different, and that's another great thing about this career. You never know everything, and as soon as you do, there's someone that will knock you right back down to earth. So every bakery I've gone to, there's things that I haven't baked before. Take here, for example, we did canelés, and I had never done canelés before. The canelés are made in the little copper molds.
Oh.
And you have to do beeswax and butter in the mold, and it's a batter, and it's really complicated.
Wow.
And basically what I do when I haven't seen something is go down the rabbit hole, we say.
To YouTube
everyone,
or Google.
YouTube, Google.
Yeah.
You can find YouTubes from France. I mean, I don't need to tell you the internet is huge, and you'd be surprised on one little thing how much information you can find. But that's generally my go-to, is to try to get as much information, because a lot of times everyone will have a different opinion too. And then when that fails, I like to call my former chefs and say, I am having the hardest time
Hope
with
you're not
this.
busy.
And that's, it's really important to maintain those relationships. I like to say that all chefs are standing on the shoulders of giants. We're very few of us invent new things. We all are making things the best we can that we learned from someone that came before us. And so it's also kind of my responsibility to pass that on too. And that's kind of the latest challenge in both food and baking, I think, with labor and stuff like that.
Now, what would you say if there was an aspiring child out there, or if a parent who was watching had a child who really loved baking, who said, I want to be a baker? I know you said it's a really tough road, but what would you, what are some positive words that
Sure,
that you
and
could
I was
give?
joking.
Yeah,
I joke like that
you
too
were.
because my daughter, I have an 11-year-old daughter who wants to be a baker. And I'm like, oh honey, please no.
I
But
wanted to retire someday, right?
I say it as a joke. The best thing, you know, it's like anything your kids get into, encourage them.
Right.
You know, the best thing they can do is learn to be really accurate and precise.
How do
It's-
you, as a parent at home, when your child, let's say, you know, your child starts with the box cake
Right.
mixes and the tubs of frosting, and
Yep.
they want to start kind of moving on to their own. Do you have any, besides, you know, butter makes it better, do you have any advice that would be
I
good
like to
for?
go with simple recipes at
Okay.
first for them.
Okay.
Don't get into these cakes that have 20 ingredients, you know. Go
Okay.
with your simple Betty Crocker, things
Okay.
like that. But let
So
them mix
kind
up
of old school
old
recipes.
school,
Okay.
traditional American baking is going to be the easiest
Okay.
way for them to get into it. And it's important to emphasize precise measuring and also following recipes. This is an argument I have with my own daughter all the time. She'll be like, Dad, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. And did you read the recipe all the way through first? No. So these are the things you have to constantly
so-
reinforce to your children. Read the recipe all the way first.
Okay.
Set out all your ingredients. We call it, in kitchens, we call it mise en place, which from French translate put in place. So before we make any recipe, we have pulled out all of our ingredients and we've set them up on the bench.
Okay.
So that while you're mixing and measuring stuff, you don't go, oh, Chuck, I need this, and have to go run off.
Right,
It makes
right.
you much more productive, much more effective, and you can concentrate on being precise, measuring and method-wise. And those are the biggest things I found with my daughter. If your kids are anything like mine, she knows everything, right? And I have to say, honey, I know Dad, I get. So I've learned to say, can I give you my professional opinion about what will happen if you
Oh,
do
there
it
you
this
go,
way?
there you go.
And that works really well. But I think it's most important to be encouraging. Get them classes. There's so many good out school and online classes if you're not comfortable going out and doing classes. But the summertime usually offers a wealth of cooking classes and baking classes for children. And I think it's really important to let your kids get their hands dirty, make mistakes, and learn from it, and to be encouraging to them, you know.
One of the things you brought up, which I just wanted to kind of just reiterate to viewers, is when you're actually in, you know, any type of learning, or in college or study skills classes, which talk about when you first get a book, to actually go through the table of contents and to read through the table of contents.
Yeah.
So you have an idea kind of what you're in for with the book. And
Where
that's,
you're going.
Yeah, and that's what I heard you say, to read through the recipe first and to have an idea of where that's going before you actually dive right in.
Yeah, diving right in and not knowing what you're in for is just setting yourself up for failure and disappointment. So absolutely.
I wanted to ask you, because I think I know myself, and I'm sure a lot of viewers, we really like to cheat on this whole sifted flour thing.
Sure.
So can you talk to me, like, does sifted flour really matter?
It depends on what you're making. If you're making a very fine, delicate cake,
What is delicate cake? What is that?
any like a fine cake or an angel food cake or a chiffon,
Oh,
even some just
okay.
regular chocolate cakes.
Okay.
You know, if you like that really
Light and airy?
light, it
Okay.
really
Okay.
helps. The biggest reason, there's two big reasons you want to sift. One is to make sure you're not going to have any lumps.
Okay.
So the worst thing you want in your cake batter is a lump of flour that hasn't been hydrated.
Right.
It's gross. You'll get it in
is
your cake.
gross, right.
So that's going to take those. The second thing it does is it incorporates all your dry ingredients together.
Oh.
So for cake batter, we don't want to mix it a lot after we've added all of our dry ingredients. It's not like bread where you want to develop it. Cake batter is basically you're just hydrating and incorporating till it's homogenized. So when you sift all your dry ingredients together, what that does is help incorporate all of those together so that you don't have like a big pocket of salt or a pocket of baking powder or something
So
like that.
I
it
have to
helps
interrupt
mix it
you
through the
real
flour.
quick.
Yeah.
Because I think that what I'm hearing is there's a misnomer when you say sift the flour. So correct me if I'm wrong. So what I'm hearing is you would actually put all the dry ingredients,
That's correct.
and then you would sift all those dry
All of
ingredients.
them together.
Whether it's baking soda or baking powder, your salt, your sugar.
Sometimes
all
it
of those
depends.
things.
Sugar, sometimes you're using in the bowl with the fat. Depends on the cake recipe.
Okay,
You know,
okay.
you cream sugar with fat,
Okay.
or you mix the sugar with oil. So
Okay.
sugar doesn't always get it. It's mostly the flour and those leavening and flavoring ingredients that
So
that
if
work
a
really well
recipe
on.
says flour, sifted flour,
Yeah.
would a person assume that you're just sifting the flour? Or would a person assume that you're going to be sifting also with the baking soda or
My
baking
advice
powder?
would be sift all your dry ingredients on something that
Okay.
is not developed, like a
Okay.
cake or a pound
Okay.
cake or something like that. And
Okay.
look, and I've done it where I just take and put it in a bowl and stir it with a whisk. And that
Oh.
works too.
Oh, okay.
That works for pound cakes and quick
Okay.
breads and stuff
Okay.
like that. As long as you're not getting any clumps of flour.
Because
That's
those
what you really
sifters,
want to avoid.
the grates are pretty small.
They are pretty
And I
small.
could see if you had sugar granules
Sometimes it
in
doesn't go
there,
through it.
you're like constantly hitting
That's
the
right.
side, trying to get it
That's
to go
correct,
down.
yeah.
So, okay. But that makes sense because you don't want to have any lumps in there.
Yep. You don't
But
want
if
any
you're
pockets of-
not worried about having a heavier
Mhm.
cake,
You know, or something that you're going to mix more than just really lightly, you're fine. You
then
don't
you're
have to
fine.
sift.
You don't have to sift. Okay, so we can follow the old Betty Crocker recipe,
Yeah.
but if it says sifting and you don't have a sifter, not the end of the world.
Just mix it together with a whisk and you'll be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Is there anything else that you would like to talk to viewers about?
We want to put out the fact that gluten is not the enemy and that sourdough, naturally long rise breads are much easier on your body than grocery store bread. And I think it's really important as a baker for us to keep clanging this bell. It's something that I've had to talk about for years of why
All right, let
artisan
me
breads are
interrupt
better
you
for
for a
you.
minute,
Yeah.
just for viewers who, so there are people who truly have a gluten allergy, and so they're not eating breads because they're not eating breads.
It's not for
But
celiacs.
talk to me actually, what, like, what is gluten? Like, it's in all flours
It's
and
in all,
grains?
it's what holds it all together.
Oh, okay.
And it's those strands that when you pull the dough, and you
Okay.
see those strands, that's gluten.
Okay.
It's directly related to the amount
And
of
so that's
protein
a
in your
natural,
flour.
that's a natural
natural.
part of the grain that's
That's
been milled
correct.
down into the flour.
But now in factory bread or grocery store bread, you cannot find a loaf of bread that doesn't have added wheat gluten to it. So what they have to do, since they make their bread in big machines, is add more gluten to it to keep it solid, to keep it from breaking down.
Oh.
So gluten has a certain lifespan, like the strands are all like this, and then as you develop the dough, they start to line up like this, and that gives it the strength. Eventually, if you mix it too much or handle it too much, those strands will break. So what added wheat gluten is going to make that be able to go through the big machines that they use in the factories. And they've taken a process that should take a day to 2 days and shorten it into hours. So from dough, from flour, raw flour, to out of the oven into cooling towers, it can take a matter of 2 hours, where a good artisan bread will take 2 days of development.
Oh, wow.
So
Wow,
what this
that's a
development
huge
does
difference.
is it make it easier to digest. So not only do we not have added vital wheat gluten, which you cannot find a loaf of bread at the store without that, but we also have fermentation going on. And we've all been learning about how
And
fermentation
let's just
is
for a
good
minute,
for
let's
us.
talk about, so the fermentation, for viewers who aren't familiar with the bread making process, you start with, and kind of help me here, because
Yeah.
I'm a little rusty. So you start with your yeast and you add sugar
That's right.
and water
Mhm.
and salt,
Yep.
and you get that mixed in, and then you add your flour. Help me here.
Sort of, and now that's a typical home baker. A lot of times with us, we just throw everything in the bowl and mix it.
Okay.
So because we have a long fermentation time, we don't need to bloom yeast. And that's what a lot of home bakers do, what you're talking about, putting yeast and sugar in
And
the
you
water.
said bloom. B-L-O-O-M.
And
Bloom
that's
the
blooming
yeast.
the yeast to prove that it works.
That
I
it's-
never
that
had
it's
yeast
gonna
that
rise,
didn't work.
actually. Okay.
And so I throw everything in
Okay.
and mix it in.
And I thought if you actually had your water too hot, you could actually kill that
You
yeast.
can, and generally for artisan baking, we're shooting for a very specific bread temperature where we like the results of that chemical reaction. And that's about 76 degrees. Between
Oh.
75 and 80 degrees is the optimum. Now we use almost full starters, which is wild yeast, but you can think of it in the same way.
Okay, okay. Interesting. When I did last season, when I did the show with Keith at the flour mill, I did some research and I didn't realize that actually like bleached flour has been a really big kind of hot topic in Americana. And a lot of countries actually have banned bleached flour, and our bleached flour here, the USDA mandates that companies put in the different vitamins and minerals
The
to
enrichment.
that
Mhm.
because it's lost all of its chemical value.
It's no nutritional value.
It has no
whatsoever.
nutritional value, and they have to actually add that in.
That's true.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when you're stripping away all of the outside of the wheat germ, you're losing a lot of the good stuff. We all like white bread, but we're losing a lot of that fiber.
well, I appreciate you bringing that up
Yeah, of
because
course.
I'm really a novice. Like I bake some bread at home, and I have a few recipes. I had done a recipe one time with whole wheat bread, and then I baked too much, and so I was like, oh, I have to just freeze it. But then I learned after I had froze it and de-thawed it that it actually sliced better.
Oh,
So
that's
it's,
funny.
It's really interesting with, when you're baking, you really get to know what you're baking and kind of the chemical components upon it. And maybe I was trying to slice the wheat bread. Who would do that when it's warm to put butter on it? I don't know.
Yeah.
So maybe that was why.
Yeah. Yeah, baking is interesting. It's this. You do the same thing every day, but it's different. Every day is a challenge to maintain your level of consistency. It doesn't matter what the weather or what your ingredients are doing. Your customer wants the same thing on the shelf every day.
Right.
So that's really where our challenge comes in. Yeah.
Well, Jay, thank you so
My
much.
pleasure.
You are just a vat of knowledge. Thank you so much for
My
taking the
my
time to
pleasure.
talk with us
Thanks
today.
for having me.
My pleasure.
All
Thank
right.
you.